So my journey with film and gospel-related themes started pretty early in life. I started noticing that films and stories had echoes of the gospel. Gospel imagery, Christ figures. You've probably noticed these in some films. I'm not going to go through everything, but let me just tell you some of the ones that immediately grabbed me. Okay, and this you're learning about me a little bit while we do this. But so one of the movies I enjoyed was watching Superman movies. One of the movies was Superman Returns, and I remember watching this. I don't know if you remember this, but Lex Luthor he's doing a land grab. There's not enough land. No one's making any more, but he decides, I'm going to make a big island in the Atlantic Ocean, and I'll be rich because I'll have more land than everybody else, right? And he laces the island at its like budding inception with kryptonite, which is of course Superman's, kryptonite, right? So it's this way he can't interfere, right? And Superman goes to try to disrupt this whole thing. And I still remember this. He lands on this island not knowing it's been laced with kryptonite. And he immediately is weakened. And Lex Luthor attacks him and he falls to his hands and knees. And Lex Luthor is just beating on him, kicking him, smearing him, whatever. Anyway, and he's bleeding from the wrists, Superman is. And then Lex Luthor stabs him in the side with a shard of kryptonite, just right in the side. And his feet are bleeding, and he's crawling on this jagged, rocky surface. And he's bleeding particularly from here and here, and from his ankles with a giant shiv in his side. That's very deliberate imagery, isn't it? Then he gets underneath this island and, in very Superman style, hoists it out of the ocean, flies it into outer space with his final bit of strength, shoves it out into the void, saving the world, and falls backwards, which is funny that the whole island has lost gravitational pull and floats out, but then Superman falls back under the force of gravity. This doesn't work. Physics do not get followed in this. But anyway, he falls backwards and makes a perfect cruciform pose as his eyes close and he dies and plummets down to earth. And then, of course, in the story, he rises again. And I thought, that is unbelievable. That cinematic portrayal, so full of Christ imagery, right? You see it? So that was one. And then I was watching Spider-Man, and Spider-Man 2. And there's a whole, maybe you've seen it. There's a train full of people, and they're about to go off the end of this rail, and the rail's incomplete, so they're going to plummet to their death, the whole train. And so Tobey Maguire, Spider-Man actor, right? He gets in front of the train, and he starts shooting his webs out. And he puts his feet down into the cross beams as the train is pushing him along, trying to stop, right? So he's doing this, and as the webs are binding to the buildings, he gets stretched fuller and fuller, and his webs start ripping from his wrists, and he starts bleeding. His feet are torn up from the beams that have been lacerating his legs. His suit starts ripping in different places. He's been battling with Doc Ock, the guy with the big, mechanical arms coming out of his back, and he's lacerated in his side. And it's wide open. And he stops the train, and the people on the train reach out and they grab him and they hoist him over the top of their, like a crowd surfing kind of thing, over the top of the crowd to get him to the front of the train because it's very crowded. And he is in a perfect cruciform form as he goes back over their heads. I go, wow, that's deliberate. Someone's making very deliberate artistic choices in portraying this. And so it started looking at other things. And I have sisters, and we loved reading the Jane Austen books, like Pride and Prejudice. And this is from the books or the movie. Pick your edition. You probably want the BBC one, right? It's better. It's better. Okay. But anyway, I put the Keira Knightley one on the handout there. But in all of them, you have this beautiful element where Lydia runs off with Wickham to the shame of the family. And all the sisters have been doomed they've been imperiled because they've been tainted by association with her sin. And so Elizabeth, who's had a little bit of a growing fancy for Mr. Darcy, realizes there's really no hope. He has too much honor, and he won't associate with a family like ours. And then we find out that Mr. Darcy, the righteous man, decides to, at personal expense to himself, pay off all the things that would cause shame to restore this family because of his love for Elizabeth. He redeems them without her even know, but his love generates this self-sacrificing, redemptive, paying the price work to redeem this family and secure a bride for himself. And I thought, that is very gospel theme there, right? Not a Christ image per se with like bleeding wrists and all of this, but thematically in the actual structure of the story, a gospel theme. Totally changing genres. Toy Story. Toy Story, the original one with Woody and Buzz. How many people have seen this? Oh, by the way, this spoiler alert, I'm ruining every movie in this. If you see the image and you really care about it, you need to leave now, okay? So, spoiler alerts. Toy Story. So, it's fascinating. Woody and Buzz, Woody's the favorite toy. Buzz comes in, he's got new technology, he's very cool, but Buzz is delusional. Buzz thinks he's a real space ranger. He's not a real toy. He doesn't think. He thinks he's made for more than what he's actually created for. So he's made to give a child pleasure. He's made to be a toy. The greatest thing in the world, Woody says, is to be a toy and to live for the pleasure of the one, your owner, the one, Andy. But Buzz wants more than that. He's delusional. He thinks he has to make something out of himself, right? And the big moment in the story is when they're in Sid's house. They've been captured. And Buzz is ready to give up. He's lost his arm. He believes he can fly, but he can't fly. He realizes he's a toy. He's just a toy. And Andy says, "You're not just a toy. There's a kid over in that house who thinks you're the greatest toy in the world." It's reminding him who he is. And then Buzz looks at his foot, and he sees the name Andy written on his soul. He sees the name of his owner written on his own soul. He remembers who he is, and it's in that moment that he finds the courage to live again. Now that's a different kind of image, but I thought, that's an interesting image, isn't it? So that was another one. Then Lord of the Rings. I love Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings fans in here? Yeah? Okay. So I don't have all time in the world, but in the Lord of the Rings, in a sense, you have not one, but three Christ images working in parallel. So you have Gandalf, who is like this prophet-like character, who is sent to save the world. You have Aragorn, the exiled king, who has come back to restore the throne and save the world. And you have Frodo, who is kind of like this suffering servant, who bears the weight of evil to its doom at personal cost to himself to save the world. So you have these three things. And if you think of the three offices of Christ, prophet, priest, and king, you kind of have them there, don't you? The prophet, Gandalf, the priest, Frodo, who's suffering on behalf of the people, and you have the king, the return of the king. And what's interesting is they all die and rise at some level. So Gandalf falls in the mines of Moria to return, right? That's death and resurrection to save the world of the prophet. You have Frodo, who bears the weight of the ring into Mount Doom and forever loses Middle-earth. We set out to save the Shire, but not for me. He never gets to live in the world he saved. He has to leave it. He gave up the world to save it. And Aragorn takes the paths of the dead. The dead, no one can pass. No one can suffer to pass the paths of the dead. No, everyone who's tried has died, but Aragorn walks through the paths of the dead to come and return as king, to restore all things, to bring healing in his hands, and to make the world new again. Right? I mean, look at the layers of this. It's unbelievable. So I started seeing these things, and I thought, well, this is crazy. Some of these stories come out of Christian foundation, but a whole host of them don't. Secular writers are writing these stories. And then, as I got more educated, went to school and things like that, I realized these stories of like dying and rising gods, of demigods or whatever, they're all peppered throughout history, throughout the literature of a God that comes and lays down his life to save the world. You see these stories in the old world. So then I started thinking, why? Why do we keep having these reoccurring stories? Where are they coming from? What's going on here? And then I discovered a guy named Joseph Campbell. Now, Joseph Campbell, you're not going to like him, okay? Because we're Christians and we think Jesus is the real story. Joseph Campbell does not believe Jesus is the real story. But this is what he writes in a book called The Hero with a Thousand Faces. And if you listen to the title, you kind of know where he's going with this. The Hero with a Thousand Faces. This is what he writes. This quotation is in your notes. These are all retellings of the archetypal monomyth in which the hero ventures forth from the world of common day into a region of supernatural wonder. Fabulous forces are there encountered, and a decisive victory is won, following which the hero returns to bestow boons upon his fellow man. So Campbell is saying this story it's a tale as old as time. These stories go way back. We've just been telling the same old story over and over again. Jesus is just a variation on the theme of the great monomyth that has been around. Mono, one, myth. It's not true. It's one story. It's just variation on theme. And I thought, boy, that's a disorienting thought. Like that Jesus is just one among many. Of course, we know Jesus came and lived in space and time and history. But he's looking at it through the lens of story, narrative, and myth. But then C.S. Lewis helped me tremendously with this. So if you know C.S. Lewis's story, one of the things that really helped him was when Hugo Dyson talked to C.S. Lewis about myth and truth. And Lewis explored this with Tolkien as well, J.R.R. Tolkien of Lord of the Rings. But these are some of the things that Lewis has written, and I find it very helpful. This was a letter that he wrote to his friend Arthur Greaves. Now, the story of Christ is simply a true myth. Now, when Lewis uses the word myth, he doesn't mean like not true. He means one of the great stories, the great epic stories out of antiquity. The story of Christ is simply a true myth, a myth working on us in the same way as the others, but with this tremendous difference that it really happened. It really did happen. He writes this in an essay called Myth Become Fact. The heart of Christianity is a myth which is also a fact. The old myth of the dying God, without ceasing to be a myth, comes down from the heaven of legend and imagination to the earth of history. It happens at a particular date in a particular place, followed by definable historical consequences. We pass from Baldur or Cyrus dying nobody knows when or where to a historical person, crucified. It's all in order under Pontius Pilate. We must not be ashamed of the mythical radiance resting on our theology. We must not be nervous about parallels and pagan Christs. He's talking about these kinds of parallel stories. They ought to be there. It would be a stumbling block if they weren't. We must pass not in false spirituality. We must not, in false spirituality, withhold our imaginative welcome. For this is the marriage of heaven and earth, perfect myth and perfect fact, claiming not only our love and our obedience, but also our wonder and our delight. Don't you love that? It's so good. It's so good. So what is he saying? He's saying Jesus is the ultimate story, the true myth now become fact in flesh and blood, in space and time. But we must not lose the wonder of the mythic quality of what is actually happening here. The grand stories, like Superman saving the world, that's a myth, right? And it's wondrous, and we go to the movie and we get excited about the story. And he says, Jesus' story is just as mythic, it's just as big, just as grand, it's just true. It's just true, which just makes all the difference. So that was very helpful to me because I started saying, okay, if Lewis is right, these stories are echoes of what ultimately is happening in the incarnation, in the gospel. But we still have to account for how is it that pagan people are coming up with the same kind of story? Maybe not in the same details, but the contours are the same, right? How is that possible? So I've been thinking about this for a while. I'm going to propose this. I want you guys, we'll have some Q&A in a little bit, and you can tell me if you think I'm right or wrong, or if you have a better way of thinking about this. I'm a learner just like you, okay? But this is how I've been thinking about it. I think when God created us in his image, imago Dei, image of God, I think God pre-wired us to be receptive to the story that he was going to tell in redemptive history in the gospel. I think we're prepared from the dawn of creation to resonate with the gospel story that God would one day tell in space, time, and history. So we know Revelation says that the Lamb was slain before the foundation of the world. So this is plan A we're on. So before God said, let there be light, he knew his son was going to die on the cross. So I think that the incarnation, the atonement, the self-sacrificing love of Christ on the cross, I think God said, I'm going to shape humanity in such a way that they will resonate with this story when I tell it. They'll be ready for it. Sort of a pre-evangelism thing. Which means that if you are a secular person, don't believe in God or whatever, you can still intuit some of this just by looking down in your soul. Just like, so we came over here and now my plug has 2 pins, right? But you can look at the pins and you can kind of say, I know what that socket looks like by looking just at the pins. If you don't have both sides of it, right? So we have the image of God. We've got like this shape here of what we need to plug into. We can intuit to some degree what the socket looks like as the story comes to us. Does that make sense? You're tracking with the analogy? So a secular person just has the plug. They sense this is what I need to plug into. If I could plug into something this shape, it would be wondrous. It would be beautiful. It'd be amazing. And because they can intuit from the adapter, they know what we're plugging into, even though they may have never seen the adapter. They've seen the actual plug. Does that make sense? So we have general revelation of what God's built into us in the image of God, our conscience, and all these kinds of things, common grace. And then special revelation comes along and they link. They link. And even if you only have half of that equation, you can still intuit the contours of the other side. So I think that's what's going on. And I think there's some particular features of the pins, if you will, of how this plugs in. So we're on page 2 now, Gospel Echoes. And I just want to mention these and then give you a few other examples, and then we're going to have a discussion, okay? So here are 5. There's probably more. Here's 5 features of those gospel echoes. So number 1 would be incarnation. Incarnation. Watch, when you're listening to stories or watching movies, watch for the theme of incarnation, of one person becoming a part of another group or another species, or someone who comes from the outside and then comes and is one of us. Watch for that theme, incarnation. Messianic promise. This is the chosen one. Just think of all the movies that you've seen where there's a chosen one, a prophecy, something special about this one. This one's different. Self-sacrifice. This is huge. It's huge. Self-sacrifice. Loving, self-giving to save people, save the world. Self-sacrifice. Resurrection. It's not always there, but it's amazing, especially when you move into myth or fantasy or whatever. It's amazing how much resurrection there is. My kids will be reading books, and my kids have a question they ask. When someone dies, and they go, are they dead, or are they like not, they're going to come back dead? And I'm like, and it's a good question, because you got to know how much am I mourning this character, right? Because so often they come back, and you're like, they weren't dead, right? Maybe people thought they were dead. It's a pseudo-resurrection sometimes. And then the last one is eschatological hope. Watch for eschaton, end of times. The world made new, all things good and beautiful in the end. Watch for that. It's amazing how often these themes come up. Okay, let me just give you 6 more, and then we're going to have a conversation, okay? So Terminator 2. How many of you have seen Terminator 2? This is an old movie. Yeah, right. So Terminator 2, you've got, Arnold Schwarzenegger. The machine takes on human flesh, incarnation, falls in love with Sarah Connor, right? And in love, in the end, lays down his life to save her and save the world. That's pretty gospel-y, right? Titanic. Jack's not supposed to be on the ship, but he wins gambling, he wins his fare. Steps upon the doomed ship that we all know is going down. Walks to the prow of the boat, puts his body in crucifix form, and declares himself king of the world. In love, he falls in love with, Kate Winslet. We got some sketchy stuff in there too, yes. But in the end, what does he end up doing? He lets her on the door and gives up his life to save her. And in the end, they bring the old woman back and they say, his name wasn't even on the manifest. And she says, see how he saved me in every way. It's amazing. Avatar. By the way, all 3 of these so far are James Cameron films, who is not a Christian, hates Christians, but loves our story. Avatar. So you've got, I can't remember his name, but he's the ex-military guy. He's lost his mobility. He literally hooks up to the machine and he takes on the flesh of the Na'vi, the blue people, the big blue people. He takes on their flesh. He becomes one with them. He falls in love, becomes their king, goes to battle against evil, saves them in self-sacrificial ways. In the end, dies. They plug him into the tree of life and he's reborn. So you have kind of a death and resurrection at the end of it. Again, gospel themes, for sure. Frozen. One of my favorites. So Briefly, I'll just abbreviate it. I can go a long time on Frozen. But Elsa runs away, right? Her powers are out of control. She freezes the entire world. She's in despair. She's alone. She's free, but she's alone. Love is an open door. She slams the door. So this is bad. And it is the loving pursuit of Anna who braves all kinds of treachery to come be with her sister, endures the curse in her own flesh, right? Throws herself between the sword to save Elsa's life, freezes to death, and because of the act of true love, of self-sacrifice, right? Because what does Olaf say? True love is putting someone else's needs ahead of your own. So through the act of true love, self-sacrifice, saves her sister and is reborn. Death, resurrection. And then Arundel is set to rights. The world is made new. Harry Potter. Now, I don't know if Harry Potter was very controversial in the United States, so people weren't sure if you should go watch it because of the magic and all that kind of stuff. I'm sure it was controversial here as well. What redeemed it for me was the very last book. And Harry is, there's these deathly hallows. I don't know, there's 3 of them. Harry has all 3 of them. It means he's invincible. Death cannot master him. Okay, he's the master of death. He has all 3. But he also knows that Voldemort, the evil guy, that there's a piece of Voldemort's soul that's been attached to him. It's in his own flesh. Harry is bearing evil in his own flesh, and the only way to get rid of it is to die. And so he even though he's death can't touch him because he has these hallows. He walks to his own death and surrenders his own life so that evil might die in his own flesh. And he lays down his life to protect his friends and then comes back from the dead to vanquish evil finally and to rid the world of all the brokenness. It's amazing, amazing gospel imagery. Last one, Avengers, Endgame, the number 1 grossing film for that whole time. I mean, unbelievable how many of you went and saw Endgame, Avengers Endgame? Not as many as I would have thought. Okay. Tony Stark is Iron Man. Thanos, which is the Greek word for death, from thanatos, death. Thanos has this gauntlet with all the infinity stones on it, snaps his fingers. He purges the world, half the world of all life. So he kills half the people on the planet. And Tony Stark as Iron Man, he didn't lose anyone in the big purge. And the Avengers are going to try to go defeat Thanos, put death to death. That's the mission. Tony doesn't need to be in the fight, though. He's got Pepper Potts. He's got his daughter. They're on this idyllic lake in paradise. They're untouched by the great pains and troubles of the world. But then Tony's invited into the war, and he realizes he's the only one who has the insight to do the time travel piece that they need to do. He figures it out. And so there's a great scene where Pepper says, "You don't have to do this. You don't have to do this. You don't owe them." And he says, "But I can't." He says, but I know what I need to do. And she says, "Will you be able to rest?" And he realizes, I can't rest if I have the solution. So he knows he's the only one with the solution. He enters the war that's not his to enter. Incarnation. He steps into the fight. Dr. Strange says, I've done all the calculations. There's only one way this ends for Thanos. One way of salvation. How exclusive is that in an inclusive world? One way of salvation. And Tony, in the battle with Thanos, realizes, he looks at him, and Dr. Strange goes, "This is the only way." And Tony knows what he needs to do. And he steals the Infinity Stones, puts them in his little Iron Man gauntlet, and has all the cosmic power in the world in his hand. He can do anything he wants. And he snaps, and he puts death to death. And it takes his own life. It saps the strength right out of him. He could have done anything. This was not his fight. But he lays down his life voluntarily in self-sacrificial love. And Pepper comes as he's dying. Everything's about to fade. His heart is about to flitter out. And she says, you can rest now. You can rest. And then the world is reborn. And all those souls that were eliminated are resurrected. And the world is green and good again. Like, whose story is this? So they're hijacking our story, you see? It's so powerful. It's everywhere. That's our story. And they're making billions of dollars off of it. You can't save the world without this. It's kind of self-sacrificial love.